How to use AutoFac with ASP.NET Framework WebForms. A quick introduction. AutoFac is a dependency injection container which also works with the older ASP.NET WebForms. Now, WebForms at this stage is more of a legacy web development framework on the old .NET. There's no built-in DR container for WebForms, and developers had to rely on third-party containers such as Ninject and AutoFac. Dependency injection, very simply a common software design pattern and not strictly a .NET concept. So in other programming languages, this is a very, very simple starter best practice. It only became easier to start doing dependency injection on the newer frameworks such as MVC and Razor. So in the older .NET, especially in the WebForms, it was a little bit difficult. And also, it wasn't a common practice by then. So on the latest web projects, by default, dependencies and services are just sort of out of the box. There's even a built-in dependency injection container. You don't have to use a third party like an Ninject. But now, using AutoFac on the old WebForms, you're going to need to install two NuGet packages. And these are AutoFac and AutoFac.web. Most of the setup can be done in global SX file. So that's once you've done the installation, the wiring of dependencies and services. But this is not going to scale very well if you have a large application. A real-life application is going to have a lot of tables in a database, repositories, and logic. All of those are going to need to inject services. So, there's no good or bad way. This is only going to be what I've found to be working reasonably okay for me. And how I've chosen to go about the setup is to create a completely separate project specifically for dependencies. I have called this project Composition Root. AutoFac and AutoFac.web will need to be installed on every project where it's used. I'm not completely sure, but on the new projects, sort of using a new .NET, you only just need to install it. Any library, any NuGet package, you only just need to install it on the one project, and any other project that inherits from it, you don't need to reinstall it again. So there's a hierarchy or some kind of inheritance. But on the older .NET versions, it looks like every project needs a copy of the same library, and it's as if like they can't be shared. So you have to reinstall them again on every project. So in this example, the NuGet packages are going to need to be installed on the composition root, on the WebForms project, and also on the test project. This is really a very, very small example. It's a small project. There's only a few entities and services. But, just looking at this configuration here, already on just the 4 or 5 repositories, it's actually getting a little bit long. But now the simple job of this project or this separate class is just to be the only one place where all the classes are instantiated. And that's really the benefit of using a DR container. There's no need to know where, how each class is being used. You don't need to keep the constructor. If you update the constructor, you just need to register the services in the DR container. On top of the core AutoFac, I also have a helper utility to actually build the containers. In most cases, there's going to be a connection string. So ultimately, you're going to need to create concrete connection to a database for those repositories. So now let's make a practical example. We have a product manager service that uses a time provider and a product data accessor. So the product data accessor can almost like a repository. So these are the two dependencies or the two services of this class. And once again, the whole benefit of dependency is, as much as possible, avoid having to manually create new instances of this product management service. Instead, the DR container is going to do all the work. Okay? If you're coming to think of it on a larger system, you're also going to have a whole lot of test classes, test cases, and you can have this one service now needing however many test cases you need, and then you have to create multiple instances or manually having to new up each on the constructor. Another scenario, if we now evolve this service, this product management service, and we change the constructor that we no longer need a daytime provider or more services are needed in the constructor, we're going to have to manually go and change it everywhere. We're going to have to go to every test case, everywhere where we're newing up this thing. And then if we're using a DR container, there's not even a need to create a constructor. We just have to register the service. This test, in this test project, we are only testing the repository. So also, it's just another example of how we didn't have to new up the actual dependencies. We're going to resolve them using the utility class. This makes life very simple. The test cases can evolve without having to change them everywhere. Now, in the web project, resolve the service on the page. The simplest way is to place the code in the page init event. Okay, there are other better ways to do this without having to clutter up and pollute this page init event. What is needed is the two NuGet packages, AutoFac and AutoFac.web. And then from there, you can choose to lump the registration code in the global SX file. But ideally, if you're going to be having a large application, you might want to move the container code to another utility class.